online and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Leidy will be absent. Mayor Pro Tem Luke Manjiro-Massa.
Here.
Councilmember Burns will be absent. Councilmember Jaramillo will be absent. Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Roper will be absent. Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Nowicki.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Must be summertime. All right, we have 3 items for discussion tonight. The first one is the 2026 Food Truck Carnival event options, and we have Director of Communications Diana Wilson, who will present this item to council. Welcome, Director Wilson.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. If any of you had an opportunity to look at the memo before we updated it, you will realize I thought I was coming to talk to you about maybe we could have this at the marketplace, but the marketplace did get back to us late last week. So we had to put on our thinking caps really quickly and come up with Food Truck Carnival. So I do want to preface with the reason I'm coming back is to talk about what to do in 2026 and a little bit about 2025. But as we left it at the last time we talked about this, it was like, oh, we'll just do something new because we're not going to have a place to put it. And then I got excited and thought maybe we could put it at the marketplace, but we can't. So now the question really is, should we totally cancel it now and try and come up with another idea, or should we look at other options? And there's a few reasons for this. The first is we're expecting soil remediation on the property behind us, right? But City Hall still isn't down. Still need to build a parking lot there before the remediation would happen. So we probably can hold off until the fall and see what progress there's been for the carnival. And the biggest question here is the carnival. They like to book out relatively early. So if we can't let them know by fall whether they can come or not, we won't be able to have a carnival. But we probably can wait until the fall. And then we also had other replacement ideas, Arts and Eats, Rhythm and Brews, A Taste of North Glen, and Art Fest. And just wanted to make sure to remind everybody this is a pretty successful event, and it's also one that brings in the most revenue of our big 3. So July 4th and Pirate Fest are super fun and have pretty similar attendance. Actually, July 4th has our best attendance on a one day, that's for sure. But this one, because of the carnival revenue and because of the food truck revenue, is a nice addition to our general fund. So again, we have several options that I wanted to run by you and get your feedback. The first is keep the event as is, and then we can decide in the fall whether the site can accommodate the carnival or if it looks likely that the remediation will happen before then. And in all honesty, if they're like, well, we think remediation will happen on April 15th, well, why couldn't we just wait till May 20th if it's going to be that close, you know what I mean? So that would be a staff discussion, but it really is up in the air. It's hard to say, and the length of time that the building is taking to come down really has nothing to do with us, right? It's mostly Excel. So I don't want to bag on Excel, but it could be a while, you know? All right, so the next one is, as a contingency, combine the State of the City event with Food Truck Carnival to be featured on a Saturday. So this way, if we don't have the carnival, but it's combined with State of the City, if you remember, I think you were all here for State of the City last time. Councilmember Nowicki, were you here for State of the City? I don't think so. So State of the City, just as a reminder, was on the festival lawn, and we had that 80s band. We originally planned to do a drone show, but it rained that night, so we moved the drone show to a different event. But that was the plan, and really packed the festival lawn area with a number of people from the community and booths about what the city does and their different boards and commissions. So it really was like a highlight of not only the city of North Glen, but also quite a few community partners. And then we had a screen and showed a video and that type of stuff. So in our plans for events, State of the City is supposed to return in 2026, which is a non-election year for local city council members. And the thought behind combining it with the carnival is, if we don't get the actual carnival part of Food Truck Carnival, we could probably replace it with a drone show, right? If we were going to have a drone show for State of the City. I should say there's a caveat in this, in that I do have a budget proposal for State of the City. $50,000 is what it pretty much takes to get a headliner band, all the logistics to back up an event, and the drone show is the most expensive thing, similar to fireworks for 4th of July. So there's a $50,000 budget proposal that you guys will see when we get into budget season. However, if we combined it with food truck, not Carnival or not Carnival, that amount could probably be reduced because all the logistics are already covered. We don't have to get separate porta potties. We don't have to get a separate stage. We don't have to do all of those things. We also would locate it in EB Reigns on the south side of the event, is our thought. Because this year we didn't activate that. We had all the food trucks up by the stage area and on the street. So the south side we could set aside for State of the City. So there's that idea. And then last idea is we keep State of the City as is, and it's part of the budget process, and we totally replace the Carnival with something else. One of the main reasons I wanted to bring this back to you is when we talked about events, engaging the marketplace in that park over there was one of the big ideas. And so it's pretty clear that the marketplace would love to partner with us on smaller events, nothing this big. So the liability of a carnival and trying to make agreements with their tenants for a 3-day event to invade on their parking really was a big hurdle for them. So even though I tried to keep the alcohol, the stage, all of that stuff in our public park area, just having the carnival in their lot and knowing the attendance of that event for such a long duration, they saw it's a pretty big liability challenge with the carnival, and their tenants trying to get all of them in agreement to support it was pretty far-fetched. So that's why they were like, well, Safe Street Halloween, great. Having a shred event, great. But things bigger than that, they saw as pretty challenging. So those are the 3 ideas that we came up with. And the whole new event part, the chances of us doing something large at the marketplace, I would say is very, very, very low. And for 2026, we do have an August event that will take place in Centennial Park because they're opening the box and celebrating our 150th Colorado and 250th country anniversary. What did they call it? They called it a commemoration, and then there was a really long, complicated word that I'm not going to try to say. But it was so that commemoration will happen in August for sure in that park, in addition to the normal things that we have there. So I did some pros and cons. So if we keep it as is, we know the current brand, audience, revenue. We have the same challenges on the site that we always have: parking, impact to theater and rec center, impact to businesses, traffic and street closures. Option number 2, we would maintain the current brand, audience, and revenue, and it would be a reduced cost because instead of 2 events, it would be 1. The drone show may not be the same draw as a carnival. I mean, if we had a carnival and a drone show, we'd really have parking issues, let me tell you that. But that's an okay problem for me to have from an events perspective. But if we only had the drone show and not the carnival, it won't be quite as big of a draw, but it's more of a draw than not having a central thing. And the 150, 250 commemoration thing for the State of the City, that's kind of the thing we're going to work with for that event as well, is a nice draw. I think people like patriotism, and I also believe that the commemoration is already starting off, people celebrating it, and I think that will be, attractive. Parking limitations, impacted theater, street closures. So that's the cons there. On option 3, the biggest pro there is the opportunity to develop a new event, which is very exciting, I'm sure, to my special events staff. But it is an unknown, and you have to invest more in marketing or else you won't get the attendance that you expect. Whatever the new replacement is, reduced revenue is something we'll have to face. And we have actually looked at a number of different aspects to replace the carnival. So our agreement with the carnival is they show up and use the parking lot. They provide us with liability insurance, and they provide us with the percentage of their take, right? So we make revenue, and the liability to us is relatively low. Other things that we've looked at, whether that's inflatables, whether it's some kind of obstacle course for kids, or even just bring carnival games, those companies don't bring it and give you a cut. They want you to pay for it. So that would be out of our budget instead of revenue to our budget. And we could use it as revenue generating, but staffing or finding a partner that's willing to do that and sell tickets and that type of stuff is a heavy lift. And one of the reasons July 4th isn't as big as it was before I got here is because we lost a number of community partners. Because I was like, wow, somebody want to do that, right? Some nonprofit wants to raise money, and that's not always the case. So the replacements that we've looked at for the carnival haven't been to find the same kind of activation and a family kind of thing. And truthfully, it's really teenagers, right? Did anybody go to the carnival? I know Councilmember Walker was there, Councilmember Kondo. So, it's the kids that, it's a big deal to them in the beginning of summer and they go to the carnival. So to try and attract a similar audience and family event that offers something to our younger people, we haven't been able to find a replacement that isn't going to cost us money as opposed to bring in revenue and not a little bit of money, I have to be honest. If we let people just come and do stuff for free, it's not cheap. And then we need to build a new audience if we did something like Blues and Brews or some other type of event, and then we have the same challenges at the site that we always do. And for larger events, I don't know if you guys went to Thornton Fest not that long ago, so they attracted 50,000 people to their event, which is a lot. The biggest difference that they have over us, to be honest with you, isn't that they're a bigger city, it's their site, right? So they have better parking, they have more room. I don't think the event that they put on are any better than ours. I think we have great events. But because the site is what it is, where people can park is a challenge. The marketplace might have been able to accommodate more, it would have been able to accommodate more, but that's not really an option. So those are the three options I wanted to bring to your attention and for you to ponder, and that could have an impact on the 2026 budget process, and get your feedback. What questions do you have? And if I talk too fast and need to repeat something, just let me know.
We have a lot of questions for you.
Great.
I do have one quick question, though, that might help everybody in their thinking, though. Do we know what the timeline is of that potential parking lot area-ish?
I think that maybe Jason's a better person to ask this, but my take on it is that once the building comes down, we can get the parking lot up pretty quickly. It's getting the building down that's kind of held us up. Do you agree with that, Deputy City Manager?
Yeah, I do. I think late fall, maybe before the end of the year. They're still working on design and needing to get those things done. So hopefully by the end of the year, but we don't know at this time a precise timeline.
The timeline for the demolition of the old City Hall?
Demolition, they're doing the asbestos abatement now. That's going to take some time. And then the demo should happen soon after. So again, I don't have a precise timeline on that at this point as they're doing the asbestos removal.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Just first brush strokes, I do like option 2 from the standpoint that we're combining 2 events and there's some cost savings or synergies there. But I did have a couple questions. This notion of combining 2 events together, I wonder if, say for example, the 4th of July car show, which seems to me as a casual observer, that draws in a lot of people. Would that potentially be an option of merging that with the food truck festival?
So it's an interesting question. We could definitely look at it. I would say it's more space than anything else. We have 20 different food trucks a day. July 4th is only a one-day event. We could make it longer, but the big draw to people is the 20 new food trucks a day. We have people that come back 3 times, right? And at this point, we try to minimize the number of booths that we have at July 4th because so many people from the community come and set up their family picnic type of things. We do utilize the entire lake, but since we moved fireworks to the grass and not the water, that takes out that section. So bringing the food trucks to 4th of July, it's either
No,
the other way around.
move the car show portion to.
Oh, instead of a 4th of July car show, have a car show in May. Is that what you mean?
Check.
All right. Sorry. I totally didn't get it. So car show doing, I don't think it would be an issue. I think we could pretty easily accommodate that. It wouldn't have the same kind of draw. We probably get about 500 people at the car show over the span of that event, so.
And then one follow-up question. Could, in theory, the the carnival vendor, could they scale down?
And let me ask you your question. Scale down to what?
Well, it seems to me there were a couple rides that seemed a little bit redundant, so I don't know if they have a smaller sort of footprint that they can potentially offer in a package.
So we're kind of the smallest footprint that they have, but even if they did scale down to where would we put them?
Okay, you're saying even though it was, if they scale, we still don't, it's a space problem.
Yeah.
a
They
footprint
don't like to
problem.
go on grass and it ruins our turf.
Gotcha.
So it pretty much has to be on asphalt or hard packed dirt.
Okay,
So,
all right.
but I
thank
would
you.
like to go back to your parking lot. My experience so far since I've been here and building the rec center and building this building and so far is things take longer than we think. The demolition of the old rec center. I do believe that the old city hall will come down soon and the parking lot will be built. The question is, if we're so close on remediation, can we hold off and have food truck carnival?
Thank you.
Oops.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Director Wilson, for being here and for this information. Question here. If we did the stay as is, so option one, would we still have the state of the city plus the drone show?
It's up to you. That is a budget proposal. You guys would have to decide whether you want to have that happen in 2026 or not. It was on the original plan when we did event planning, but every year it's a new budget cycle, as you all know. So if you approved the budget for that event, we would have that event. Or if you change that budget, we would adjust as needed.
Okay. All right. Having said that, I think my vote is to keep as is for right now and kind of decide, maybe revisit it. Maybe it sounds like we might possibly be able to get one more year out of it.
I think that we probably could, and
Yeah.
then it probably really will go away because I don't know where it would move.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a nice kickoff to summer. It sounds like it's generates a little bit of revenue, which is good. So I would say number one, keep as is. If that doesn't work, then that we combine the two.
okay.
The state of the city with the food truck carnival and the drone show, and kind of.
All right, so just to clarify, Councilmember Kondo and Councilmember Nowicki, you're both for either leave as is, possibly combine over something totally new. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, I think I would stick with option one and decide in the fall. And for me, if at that point we decide we can't do it, then maybe we just shouldn't do it. I mean, I do foresee not just our city budget, but a lot of places, cutting back on their budgets and scaling down and scaling back on things. And if that's what we have to do, then maybe that would be a good place to start. So I'm for option one.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Wilson, for that update. But I do have a couple of questions. So for the revenue, our budget is $65,000.
Correct.
And I think it's page 4. That, obviously, I think this is probably a Captain Obvious question, but revenue is above and beyond what it's costing us. So is that profit $34,000 and profit $65,000 for the food trucks and the carnival percentage, or is that total?
So this is always an interesting question because you want to take your revenue and put it against your expenses, but that isn't how city budgets really work. Yes, they do bring in revenue, and they bring in revenue to our nonprofits as well, but it's not like that money goes directly to the event to be spent. The money that we originally use is from the general fund. We've gone over budget of the $65,000 on Food Truck Carnival now for 2 years in a row, so that's another budget proposal to right size those budget amounts, primarily because of portalettes, golf carts, power, and stage. So it's all labor related and service delivery related is why our hard costs have gone up. So we just, as long as we keep under our main item a total amount. So even if I go over on a line item, I'll take it from something else so that we even it out. But yes, that money goes into the general fund of the city, but it doesn't necessarily pay for the event. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I
Okay,
absolutely
good.
understand that. I'm just still trying to get cost versus, it's still an expense that the city is spending, which is what we are also trying to consider when we talk about budget.
True.
So there's that portion when budget comes to us. And then also thinking, well, if it's bringing in revenue, of course, we want to look at that and what that is versus not having that revenue, right? So
Which is
that's
one of
what
the
I'm-
reasons I'm here. I have to be honest, I think that's important, but I always feel bad because I make it sound like this event makes more money than it spends, and that's not true because we have a lot of labor expenses, right?
Yeah, no, it's
So I
just-
just don't want to, I don't want to
I
misconstrue.
mean, I'm sure all of us think, we're going to be spending way more money because right now, as Councilmember Goff said, some cities are tightening their budget, so we should probably
Right.
not look at adding more things if we don't have to.
And I support that. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm here is it's a successful event and it brings in revenue. What do we want to do? It's hard.
That's the revenue piece.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing, I actually was leaning a little bit towards what Councilmember Kondo had said and combining them with State of the City at first. I think that sounds like a really great idea in terms of, just tightening everything. If we're already having staff, like you said, staff time, event space, all of that. But it sounds like everybody's leaning towards option one, and I guess, if that doesn't work out, then we move to option two. Is that what everybody is kind of feeling? Option one? And move to
Option one, and
option two?
but I don't know about
we can't.
jumping automatically. In the fall, we just need to revisit
I
it.
think in the fall, we need to revisit, so
Okay.
I guess we just leave it as is. I love the idea of leaving space for something new, but I don't know that 2026 is going to be the right year for that, because I know we talked about that during that session when we were talking about events. I was under the understanding that we definitely wouldn't have Food Truck Carnival this year, so I guess it's kind of nice to hear that we potentially could.
Yeah, and it's hard as staff, and one of the reasons why I'm here is me and my staff look out at the old rec parking lot, look at Old City Hall, and we're like, are we sure we can? Are we sure we can? And the answer is, we aren't sure yet, right? So let's revisit in the fall.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great event, but I also hear from families that it's very expensive for them to,
It is very expensive.
and the tickets are very expensive. So, but that's probably why it generates quite a bit of revenue. Right.
It's an interesting community, North Glen is. They definitely flock to our free events, but food trucks alone, feeding a family of 4 definitely is not cheap. But people still come and they love it and they enjoy it and have a great time. So to all of our large events and our community size events, all of our food trucks usually leave very, very happy from our events.
Yeah. No, and the feedback also is people love it. It's just very expensive for a family of 4. All right, so it sounds like you have direction. Keep option one and revisit in the fall. And then at that point, I guess we decide if we want to combine it with State of the City or something like that.
Okay,
Or
all right.
other.
That sounds good. Thank you so
Pretty
much
good
for
with
your
that?
time. I appreciate it.
No other questions? All right, thank you. Okay, next up, we have council conference and training debriefing procedure, and we have City Manager Geyer, who will present this item.
Good
Hello.
evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Council. No formal PowerPoint for you this evening. You can reference the staff memorandum. We're proposing a protocol number 13 based on council direction last fall to bring forward a formal structured process for city council members to share key insights, ideas, and takeaways from conferences and trainings that you attend with council as a whole in a collaborative and transparent manner. So to simplify all of that, it's really about when those of you that go to conferences and trainings, you hear a lot through those workshops and programs that you attend. You bring that information back to your colleagues on the dais in this structured outline proposal format and share what you've learned. And then if there's any direction that council wants to provide to staff, you can choose to do that using existing council protocol. So I've drafted a protocol with a purpose and then 4 points with a protocol for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the draft. protocol in front of you. If council provides consensus this evening, then I'd bring this back for formal adoption next Monday, June 23rd. And with the upcoming CML conference next week, I have already scheduled council to debrief the CML conference on July 7th.
Does anyone have any questions? Looks like we don't have any questions. My only question was how soon we do the debrief after CML, just because I know when Councilmember Kondo and I tried to do the debrief, it was pretty far after the event. So I think closer is definitely, while it's fresh in our minds, will be
July
great.
7th.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. Everybody else? All right, thank you.
Okay,
Pretty
you're
easy
welcome.
one.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Great, our last item is safety sensitive zones data and monthly report, and we have Deputy Chief of Police Randall Darlin who will present this item. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Council. How's everybody doing? I will try to keep this brief. I tried not to give you 1,000 pages of data. I did the best I could. Tried to get it down, to dwindle it down to something that was reasonable. But this is really all the data we have. We just compressed it. What you're looking at here is essentially, this is the report that the signs provide for us. This is the data that's provided. They give it to us literally every day of the week for a month though, and then we compressed it into kind of averages so that you can see the data. Otherwise, I'd literally be handing you hundreds of pages of data for just 5 months of time frame. So I think I got let me see here, here we go. The whole focus is really just to provide information on the data, the analysis, kind of a support for the discussion regarding the safety sensitive zones and the program itself. The objectives, they've really been very consistent throughout the process. The program's been in effect for just under, or we're right at the 2-year mark right now. June was when we started. We didn't have all the data collection devices in place immediately, but June was when we started in 2023. This is the completion of our second year. It's really focused on influencing motorist behavior, improving our traffic safety within the safety-sensitive zones, our enhancement of enforcement by both patrol and traffic. Even though I've mentioned many times that we don't primarily use our traffic enforcement team in these zones. This is primarily a patrol division responsibility. And serve as a financial deterrent on safe drivers, and that's really the focus on the doubling of the fines. The judge doesn't have any leeway in that. If they're found guilty for the violation in the safety-sensitive zone, it's a mandatory minimum fine. And then just to provide a clear and visible reminder that reducing speed is really it's a focus for the city. It's what we're trying to do. It's how we're trying to make our communities safer, and it's really identified as one of our larger problems within the city. Right? Can't go to a community meeting without one of our residents talking to us about traffic safety in and around their community. Right? So when you look at our 4 safety zones, they haven't changed in the 2 years. Fox Run Parkway from roughly North Park to South Park, that's Ward 1's. Ward 2, Irma Drive from Fowler to 115th Avenue. Ward 3, Community Center Drive from SCL Health down to the entrance of the Boondock parking lot. And Ward 4, Melody Drive from Monterey Circle to a point. It's about 200 feet north of the intersection of Melody and West 100th Place. We've had some level of success. I'll go back to that. We've had some level of success in most of these. I would say where we've had the least amount of success, quite honestly, is Ward 4. We just have had the least amount of enforcement in that zone as you look at it over time. And it is one of the zones that has, actually the speed data supports that zone needs more enforcement level, okay? So when I look at these 4 zones, Ward 1, we've primarily focused our efforts on stop sign violations, a handful of speeding violations, not a lot of speeding, but more stop sign violations within the zone. Ward 2, again, stop sign violations within the zone, Malley and Irma being the primary location. Ward 3, it is without question our fastest zone. The data supports it. We write the most speeding tickets in that zone. It also has probably what I would consider at least the biggest pedestrian interaction within our community. which is the goal of the safety-sensitive zones in general. And then Ward 4, Melody Drive, Monterey Circle, that's the area where we've struggled to enforce more. The data in one direction isn't really super supportive of a lot of speed, but the data in the other direction does support that there's a speeding concern there. And quite honestly, we need to be a little bit better at enforcement in that zone. When we look at our current strategies, we really focus on prioritizing the locations with high rates of crashes, especially those involving serious injuries and bodily harm, right, or fatalities, honestly. Analyzing the trends over time to identify the persistent danger in the zones. For our traffic crashes, they're very consistent. It's our high-speed locations on Huron, on Washington, on 104th, and 120th. Those are our primary locations, right? So 104th and Huron is not every month, it's not our top location, but it's our top location many months out of the year. Washington and 104th, that left-hand turn, that seems to be very problematic for our community, right? So those are our locations. We've had, last year we had 7 fatalities. Those locations, and 3 of those were motorcycle crashes. None of those were in safety-sensitive zones. I think the nearest one was Fox Run on 112th. That was close. It was on 112th, so it wasn't in the zone, but it was nearby. So we're focusing on the locations with significant speeding. Generally, that's 10 miles an hour or more above the speed limit, rather than the minor and slower speeds. All of our safety-sensitive zones also are set at 25-mile-an-hour zones. So when you have a 10-mile-an-hour crash over a zone, it's 35, whereas if you're in a 40 zone or a 50 or 45 rather, 35, 40, or 45, which are our other speeds within the city, that 10 miles is significant because now you're escalating into 35, 45, and 50-mile-an-hour crashes, and we see far more injury and far more fatalities when we get into those speeds. We're using our radar studies, our automated counters, that's the data you have here, prior citation data in the very problem areas as kind of the guide to what we're doing and how we're identifying where we want to put our resources. And then traffic enforcement is one of the most important elements that we're doing, but it's got to be balanced against the wide array of the different responsibilities the PD has on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, what we're going to show you in the data here is that the data for our speed, our highest peak speeds, mirrors our times for our crashes, our calls for service, our rush hour times. In general, that window is a couple hours, three-hour windows of our peak speeds. And what we're seeing is that's also our highest calls for service, where we're taking the most amount of resources. So our focus is on concentrating our effort on arterial roadways, school zones, intersections with crash clusters, areas with pedestrian cyclist activity. That is our safety-sensitive zone, but broader, even beyond our safety-sensitive zones. And then deploying enforcement during peak crash times, rush hour, nighttime, based on our historic data for the department. And that is not just a traffic team. The traffic team really is a focus on school zones, our high crash locations, and our highest speed corridors. But for both of our teams, both patrol and our traffic team, that's still our focus. And then the safety-sensitive zones become really a patrol focus when they have time away from calls for service, discretionary time. That's when we focus on our safety-sensitive zones. So as we look at the integration of crime data with our deployment of strategies, we try to align our traffic enforcement with high crime areas. So in and around 118th, Washington, in and around Malley Drive, in and around 104th, 106th, and Huron. Those apartment complexes tend to have more crime in and around them. We focus a lot of our work and our traffic stops in and around those areas because, again, visibility is important as well as deterrent. Recognizing that traffic stops can help us disrupt criminal activity and increase officer visibility. It's one of the goals of what we're trying to do with our deployment strategies. And then focusing on resident concerns, but we also want to make sure that our complaints are supported by measurable risk and verified speeding data. We do get a lot of complaints at our community meetings, and when I go back and I will work with our traffic engineers, they'll use their data, smart data that they have for the city, and they'll give me reports for what the speeds are for a specific month. And oftentimes what we're seeing is that the perception just doesn't meet the reality. There's individuals who think we've got a lot of speeding, but when we look at the 85th percentile or we look at our peak speeds at different times, now not every one of our zones we can get full amounts of data. We can in our safety sensitive zones because those are 24 hours a day. The program that they're utilizing for the city using smart car data is solid. It's accurate. But it's extrapolated, right? It's not every data point isn't exact, right? It's being extrapolated from smart cars and it's being extrapolated out over a broader traffic pattern. It's accurate. The studies have shown that they're fairly accurate, but nonetheless, it's not the same data that you get when you're reading every car. Or if you're doing a speed study and you actually have a radar that is identifying every car. So when we look at the resource efficiency and measurable outcomes, we're trying to prioritize harm over citations, which I think the PD does a pretty good job at. We do write a lot of citations. We are doing a lot of traffic stops, but our officers have the discretion. They treat our residents fairly, and we can see that by the relatively few complaints we get when we do issue citations. We've issued over 4,000 citations, and we have a very minimum number of complaints. So our officers are engaging the public in a meaningful way. They're doing a good job with prioritizing harm reduction over the citation piece. Reduce traffic-related injuries and fatalities. Last year we had a rough year. That was an outlier. We don't generally have 7 fatalities in a year. It's average, in the time I've been here for the 4 years, it's average between 2 and maybe 5. Last year we had some unluck with motorcycles. It was some tragic motorcycle crashes. We're trying to deploy the officers where data shows the highest return on public safety. So our high corridor traffic areas, high crash corridors, areas with repeat DUIs, and our locations where speeding consistently exceeds that dangerous threshold. And we tend to look at that at about 10 miles an hour up, okay? That's where the data shows that we will see more significant injuries when crashes occur. When I look at the risk of misaligned enforcement, these are risks with everything we do, right? Anytime we deploy resources, there's a potential that we can increase response times to high priority calls. And that's not just traffic, that's everything, right? If we've got a public event, if we've got officers at the park handling an event, if we've got them at a ward event, those are resources that could potentially cause our response times to go up a little bit. We work through those and we do the best we can to make sure we're managing that because we don't want our 911 calls to go unanswered. Our officers are trained. They know when to break. They know when to go to those calls for service based on our priority policies. So it's not a giant concern, but it's something that I want to make sure we're talking about. Increase serious crashes in known danger zones if we're spending our time in areas that maybe don't need as much attention or where the crashes are less serious or severe. Diminishing our crime prevention efforts when we take our eye off the ball in our corridors where we have significant crime in and around 118th and Wash, in and around our troubled apartment complexes. We have an opportunity there to not have the visibility we want and in return have increased crime in an area where we already have our highest crime rates within the city. So it's a piece that we think about that our patrol commander monitors very regularly to try to make sure that we're managing those zones. And then just making sure we don't have a lower overall impact on community safety because we're our eyes on the wrong ball. Some of the feedback we had from, sorry, I jumped ahead. I flipped faster than I could speak. Our commitment to the community really is focused on responsive to complaints with visibility and education, which we've done a pretty decent job with. We can always be more responsive to our citizens, and we're trying to be as responsive as possible. But that visibility and education piece at our community meetings, with our outreach on social media, we're routinely putting out our crash locations, we're routinely putting out road closures. We're trying to educate the public on those concerns. So we're working on those pieces. Our PIO is doing what I think is a pretty good job with building that platform and really engaging our community meaningfully. Transparent use in data and enforcement decisions. Our data is, we're going to go through this data pretty diligently, and you'll see that it has some gaps, but it's still got, a pretty decent amount of information that we can operate off of. But using that data meaningfully is helpful. Dedicating ourselves to reducing harm, not just issuing citations, which I've already kind of stated that I think we do a pretty solid job on. Our officers use their discretion wisely, and they do a good job with that. Focus on risk, not just perception, because we do definitely have the perception of speed within the city. The data doesn't always support it, but it doesn't mean that we're not managing it, because we're still answering those questions. We're still running studies. We're still working with our data analytics tools to try to determine whether or not we're really managing our resources the way we need to. And then ensuring officers, they are where they are needed, when they're needed, and reinforce that safety and trust with the community, because that is what's going to get us the best result in public safety across the board, right? It's not just whether they trust us on traffic, it's whether they trust us on our crime-fighting strategies and whether they trust us when we have a serious or significant incident in the city, and they're going to work with us to solve problems. So all of those pieces very, very critical in what we're doing. When we look at the, and I'm going to jump ahead a slide. Here's our original safety sensitive zone report, and this one's been going out for the last 2 years, essentially. And it's data filled, it's tables, it doesn't really give much context. It's kind of data nerd, for lack of a better term, right? If you're a data person, you can look at this and get everything you want out of it, and maybe you may be missing a little bit of context, but there's enough there to give you what's happening and when and where, right? When, with some feedback, I kind of jumped into a mock-up of a safety-sensitive zone report that we may be moving to if it's something that council chooses to provide guidance on, where we're giving a little more context, right? So we're putting out a little bit more information on the enforcement activity, specific to patrol, specific to traffic unit. We're taking a significantly different look at the crash analysis, quite honestly, because we were just giving you a number of crashes, and here we're going to break it down to injury type, related, felony, minor, and not felony, fatal injury types, and break it down from this month to year to date to how many occurred in the safety sensitive zones across the board. Prior to this, we were just providing you the top 4 traffic crash locations in the city with the numbers, where I think this gives you a little bit broader look, a little bit more context as to what's happening, where they're happening, and kind of the level of injury that we're seeing in the crashes that are occurring within the city. And the numbers you see there, 94 is, that number is just not magically in there. I didn't just pick a number and throw it in there. That's about what we've seen in a month at times. So we can see 94 crashes in a month. It's not unusual. We'll see 800 to 900 crashes during a year. This will give you kind of a running total on the types of crashes you're seeing. How many have we had that are fatals? How many have a serious, significant injury, minor injury to no injury? And then the school citations, we have 12 school zones. It would just not be very fundamental and practical to put them in every single school zone and break it down for you, because I'd need a whole nother page of report for that. But this is actually how we've been doing it thus far. It's just a little simplified there. We'll have more of a narrative portion for you to see what it's compared to month over month, but the number for the school zone citations will be there as a cumulative of the 12 zones that we have throughout the city. So a lot to take in there. The bigger portion of this presentation isn't really the PowerPoint I just gave. It's really the data, and to have an opportunity to talk about what does the data mean, what do we see when we see the data, what do you see when you see the data, and then what can we, how can we manage the zones as efficiently and as effectively so that not only our residents, but council, the department, we're all on the same page, and we're trying to, come up with the best solution for each one of the zones as we, continue to discuss them on a regular basis. So when I look to that, it's, 30 pages of data. And what we did was we broke down the data zone by zone and direction by direction. Right? So you have basically 2 slides of pure data for the speeds in each zone, one for a northbound and a southbound in each direction. And then you have some overlay of our time within the zones based on average. And this is where one of the data points it's just not a great data point. They just give us the peak speed time. That's all they give us. They don't break it down, to the minute of the hour, or, they round up to the nearest 15 minutes, nearest half hour, actually, to the nearest half hour. And it doesn't provide a really balanced approach to see day by day if it changes much. It gives us our peak speeds, which we get them. They're going to be during that 3-hour window in general. And then when you look at our overlay of our hours of mission against the average peak speed, that's an average one. And then when you look at the second one, this is more of a point day by day graph of our missions, our time on the mission versus where the peak speed on that particular day is for a 1-month period. And we used March as that time frame. And we did it in each direction, so you can see it kind of overlays. The time zones are, in some we do a better job. We're on top of the zones at the peak speed time, and in others we miss it by a little bit here and there, or we're on it for a period of time and we're off it for a period of time. But as a whole, the data shows us that in our safety sensitive zones, our 85th percentile for 2 of our zones, Fox Run zone, and I'm going to jump back to our slide here so we can be here. So Ward 1, Fox Run Parkway, our 85th percentile here is about 6 miles an hour over the speed limit. So 85 out of every 100 cars are traveling at or below 6 miles an hour over the speed limit. And what I want to talk about most with this data is how well the signs are actually helping us. Because if you look at the data point, you'll see let's just take October for northbound Fox Run Parkway, which is the very first slide in the presentation for the data. 994 cars per day on average, okay, for the month of October. Based on speeder count, 572 cars are speeding some speed. They are going at least 1 mile an hour. So that's half. Half the cars are at least traveling 1 mile an hour over. When you look at traveling over 5 miles an hour, it gets up to 102 vehicles a day. Okay? But when you look at, that is based on average speed. When you look at a peak speed, which is the next column over, speeders 5 miles an hour, peak speed, it's 201. Those signs are cutting the speeding down by 50%. The way the signs work is they read a peak speed. So as the vehicle enters the zone, they get a speed from the farthest distance. And what happens is it reads the car multiple more times and then takes an average speed. So you'll see an average speed of cars going 5 miles an hour or over at 102, but you'll see a peak speed of 201 cars in a particular day getting 5 miles an hour and over. So you'll see that diminish by 50%. And that is consistent across all the zones. It's not one zone where that doesn't get consistent. And when you see speeders based on peak speed, for that particular zone, there are only 20 cars per day that exceed the speed limit by over 10 miles an hour. And that's based only on peak speed. Based on average speed, it's 10. That cuts in half as well. So we're seeing a very consistent process there. One of the things we're trying to look to add to these zones, if you look at the zones right now, there's just this little tiny blue and red dot that flashes. It's about this big. You can barely see it. Chief and I have asked our traffic engineers to order literal blue and red flashing lights that are going to attach to those signs. So it'll look like a squad car. Much more aggressive, much more assertive, So when it reads that speed, it's gonna light it up, and then it's gonna hopefully reduce these speeds even more. We're seeing significant speed reduction, 50%. So if we could reduce that even further, I think we'll have even a better result. So we're working on obtaining those and then installing those within the zones, all of the safety sensitive zones, where the readers are. So like Fox Run Parkway, I think we have 2 readers. Melody, I think we have 2 readers. So we'll put them on all of those locations. But that's probably the biggest tell on the fact that those speed signs are reducing the speed of traffic as they engage the zones. And we're seeing it across all of them. There's not one zone where you don't see that same 40 to 50% reduction in the number of vehicles speeding at all of the speeds, 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. So when you look at Fox Run northbound, or we'll go to southbound, that's page 2. And what you see is at peak speed, you've got half the number of cars per day traveling on this particular direction of travel. We're down to about 516 cars per day on average. You get 14 cars based on peak speed per day that are traveling at or above 10 miles an hour. When you bring that down to the average speed, it gets cut in half to 7. So we're seeing very similar issues. So the signs are doing a great job. That's a help. That is a definite. The data supports that that's occurring. How we can be better is just try to make those signs more visible, have that light up, those signs light up a little bit more aggressively, so that maybe we can get even further reduction. On the southbound Fox Run Parkway, you can see that the 85th percentile, 85 out of every 100 cars are traveling at or below 31 miles an hour. And the average speed is about 25.8. So when you look at average speed, those are the speeds that now you've got 4, 5, 6 different reads for that car. You've got the peak speed, and then you've got the speeds they're slowing down to. And what happens is that almost mirrors the speed limit on Fox Run Parkway in both directions. It gets within 1 mile an hour of the speed limit for those particular directions. Now, if we move to, well, how about if we stop there and we just go through them one at a time? That way we can get some questions, and then maybe the questions will be similar as we go through, and we'll be able to talk to them. And that way I can get some feedback from you. Sure. Yeah. Let's jump in.
Sorry. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. First of all, really appreciate this readout. And I wanted to provide my impressions on the new dashboard. I really like it compared to the current one. So definitely I'm in favor of using this new dashboard that you just talked through on page 53. Going back into the data set, I just wonder, and we could just stick with Fox Run, for example. So on page 13 of the packet, where you have a trend line that goes through October to March, covering the Fox Run safety sensitive zone.
Yes.
So you got a green line, and then you've got the red line emissions. I'm assuming that when the red line closely correlates to the green line, that means you're having people out there roughly around the time when people are.
That's correct.
Their thing.
But these
exceeding
are
the speed.
averages, so we're averaging these times. They're not minute for minute. They're the best. They're the best extrapolation we could create based on. We know when we're out there, and we know when the peak speeds are, and we took the entire month's worth of data and averaged both, and then we drew the lines off of that because there's just no way, any other way to do it. As far as we want to have better data than that. So it's extrapolated, but yes, they correlate. We want them to cross. We want them to mirror each other the best of our ability. If we were doing that, then that's the best deployment strategy we could really put in place.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of the impression I was getting reviewing this. So I just wanted to confirm that was indeed the case. And then one other question I'd like to ask. The whole analysis of looking at the crash data from 23 to 24 and then 24 to 25, was that in part to see if the implementation of the speed zone would increase the amount of accidents or
Well, we certainly
decrease?
don't want to increase them, but yes, we wanted to just have data points as to whether or not the zones are reducing the number of crashes. and we don't have a large data set. It's a small data set, right? We were eight crashes in safety zones on one year, and just a handful, it was half of that for the other year, right? So it's, with really small data like that, when you have 1 or 2 crash increase, it feels like it's hundreds of percents, right? It's 60% or 50% or even 100%, like this with 4 crashes to 8, right? But the point is to just make sure that we're tracking that data point and we're not seeing increases, or if we are seeing decreases, can we tie it to it really being enforcement related? Or, you know, do we have more DUIs in the area? Did we have road construction? There can be so many myriad of reasons as to why a crash occurred. But nonetheless, we want that data point so that we at least have something to look at. And if you get something that's kind of an anomaly, then you can dig deeper and try to figure out, you know, what may be causing it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. First of all, yes, thank you for this report. The data, yeah, it was very interesting, and I really appreciate your explanation of some of the examples. That helps to clarify things even more. So I guess the question I have, which isn't really about any of this data, but in previous, or maybe the last report out on safety-sensitive zones, there was some discussion about either putting new signs or moving the signs on Community Center Drive closer to where there's more pedestrian traffic. What was decided on that? What's going on with that?
So I don't know that we have any plan to move them. I'll have to follow up with, I don't remember that specific piece. I don't believe I was here for the last one, but I'll double check with it, and I'll check with traffic engineers to find out, and I'll get an answer back to you, because I just don't know where we're at on it.
Okay, all right. That was it for me this evening so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nowicki?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, DC, for being here. Whew, boy, this is quite the report, and I mean, I enjoyed nerding out on some stuff, but this is quite a bit. So I'm just going to stick to Ward 2, since that's the ward I represent. It's not that I don't care about the other wards, but it's a lot of data. So, yeah, I appreciate the thorough deep dive. And to echo Councilmember Condo's point, I do like the updated safety zone report as well, especially if it goes out to residents. I think having that narrative, they're able to kind of read that narrative and kind of better extrapolate the data rather than having to sit there and have their eyes glaze over as they're looking at all these numbers.
Sometimes the narrative is just easier for people to understand.
Right.
It's simpler.
Right.
Right. The tables can get overwhelming. So
Exactly. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. So obviously, and I can't argue with your logic. I think you've really laid out the case for how you all approach speeding, and again, I can't argue with that. You know, I know in Ward 2 we have some significant school zones that I think you all kind of do a good job of patrolling as well. I'm curious a little bit about, and I know that's probably, there's quite a bit of speeding during those times. It looks like most of the kind of the data around tracking kind of falls in that time period of after school, probably when you see a lot of that. I'm curious too, though, maybe outside of those times, say around like 8 or 9 o'clock.
PM?
Yeah, PM, sorry, excuse me. Especially like up and down Irma. Is there any, I see one data point, if I'm looking at slide, on page 24, slide 24, there's one kind of outlier, if I'm reading this correctly.
late at night.
Yeah, late at night there. Is that, you know, I do wonder if there's more happening later at night. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so unfortunately, our data's doesn't give us minute by minute, hour by hour time frames, but it rounds it up to about a 30-minute window. There are some outliers there, and Irma's probably the one spot that has that late night outlier. The interesting piece about Irma is that the data, the complaints we get from the community on speeding for Irma is southbound from 120th. And when you look at the data, northbound is significantly faster than southbound traffic. It's like 3-4 miles an hour. It's not
Right.
a little bit, it's significant. I mean, if we put a traffic safety study out there and I lowered the speed by 4 miles an hour, we'd be touting that was a tremendous success, right? And then the perception there is that the speeding is very significant coming from 120th down through Truda, down the hill, and the data just doesn't support that. It supports the opposite. The speeding is up the hill coming from Malley through that process. Now,
So to that point, if I can interrupt you, if I'm reading this correctly, that the column way over to the right, the daily average speed limit.
yep,
Is the speed limit 25 in there?
it is.
Okay, so the bulk of cars, the average number of, so the signs are working there.
Yeah, oh yeah, they're working,
Okay.
but you still have the same reduction. It's roughly 50%, right? We go from 310 to 140.
Right.
So you're still seeing similar reductions in the number of cars that move from 5 miles an hour peak speed to 5 miles an hour average speed. It reduces it by half. But it's just interesting that perception-wise, the speeders' complaints are the travelers that are moving southbound, and it's actually where we see a higher speed. It's 4 miles an hour faster when you're moving northbound down Irma.
Right.
It's just an anomaly there, that the perception of what the residents are seeing.
Sure. So if I'm understanding this correctly, then, roughly people traveling down Irma southbound are averaging around almost 19 miles an hour when the speed limit is 25.
No. Well, yes, and you're talking southbound.
Yeah, I'm sorry, southbound.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. So the average speed, yes, the daily average speed, and again, that's multiple reads. I want to be very clear about that, right? That's reading the car multiple times, so it's going to get a peak speed. So if you look at that same speed at a peak speed, you're looking at 85th percentile, just your general speed is 31 miles an hour. But when you add up your peak speeds of 15, 10, and 5, you've got a significant number of cars that are speeding. So I don't want to downplay that. I want to make sure everybody's very clear that there are cars that are speeding, but these signs are reducing that significantly. They're really compressing the speed when they see those signs and bringing it down to the average speed to be at or around the speed limit, which is exactly what we want, right? That's exactly what we want. We want to bring them down to the speed limit, and we're having that effect, but we still have, a number of cars that are hitting peak speeds that we want to address.
Gotcha. The last piece, and this it's not necessarily related to speeding, maybe in the same kind of ballpark. I have gotten a few kind of reports from residents, and I can attest to this. Again, I live on Claude. One of the things I've noticed, especially in the morning, typically when school is going around between 7:30 to 8, down Irma, it'll often be quite busy, right? Traffic will back up. And it's particularly hard if you go down Claude to make a left onto Irma, to kind of get into that flow. So what I do, and I think what I've heard from other residents, is maybe they're avoiding the speed bumps on Claude. I don't know if that's the case or if they're experiencing the same kind of traffic issue that I am. But I'm noticing taking Graves. And so this is where I've heard from a few residents that they've reported speeding on Graves, people kind of racing down that street. And again, I'm conscious of it now, so I, really control my speed, but it is a straight shot. I mean, I'm sure a lot of our kind of the feeder roads. Are you seeing a lot of this kind of, or hearing people like off these kind of feeder roads kind of making complaints?
We get the concern about speed bumps on Claude regularly at our community meetings. There are a lot of residents who would love speed bumps on Irma. That has come to, many, many different community meetings. Irma is a collector, and we generally do not utilize speed bumps on collectors. Claude was not a collector, so it was an option for speed bumps. The residents, voted the speed bumps in back in a while back. So we get that complaint very regularly. Are we seeing some speeding at night on Irma? Yes. There's been complaints of speeding at night. Our officers have engaged in traffic enforcement out there at night, so we have had some speeders there. It's also, Irma and Huron are the only two streets that run north and south all the way through this city, right? Washington, Irma, and and Huron. That's it. So those are our main kind of arterial roads north and south through North Glen. No other road connects and traverses the entire city length. So it is definitely a road that changes as well, right? From 104th to 112th, it's a 2-lane industrial area, speeds are higher, and then it reduces into a residential neighborhood for the next mile and a half from 112th to 120th. And that change in kind of infrastructure and that change in flow of traffic is why I think the safety sensitive zone is a good location, one, and why I think the signs bring that reduction in speed there pretty well. Do I think it would help us to have those signs, better visibility with lights? Yes, I do, because I think we'll see a very similar reduction to what we're seeing now, because the sign itself is giving them that. Blue and red lights are gonna just reinforce that, bring speeds down even faster. Maybe we'll catch peak speeds start to reduce, which is the next best piece, right? Because our average speeds are where we want them, but if we can reduce the peak speed coming in because that sign's hitting them with the light quickly, that's the next goal. I think that we could maybe be successful in that endeavor.
Right. And again, I can attest to this living on Claude. Number one, again, I really applaud the speed bumps. The residents before me that took the initiative to have those put in, I really applaud. I feel like it keeps my family safe, especially as my daughters learn to ride scooters and bikes and things like that. I do also have one of the police signs, or the radar that has the police flashers, so I know at least it works on me. I do think it does work on other folks that I see coming down the street, because it kind of pings them and reminds them.
The data supports that the signs are functioning and they're working well, so that's a plus. Now I think the next step is to try to just make it more visible so that maybe we reduce speeds further and maybe we can have more of an impact on this peak speed. Because the peak speed is generally the first read that radar gets on an individual. It's not a guarantee that that's the case, but in general it is the case. And if we can get those lights to light up in a more meaningful way to where they're much more visible, then I think we can reduce that further. And we'll have the data to be able to tell us 6 months from now if that's actually happening once we put those additional tools in place.
Okay. Last question. I know in the past we had talked about speed enforcement cameras. So how does that kind of tie into this?
So we have an RFP out right now for our speed enforcement cameras for the city. I think it's gonna close, I wanna say, we're answering questions right now from potential vendors, and it'll open up, I wanna say July 15th, and it'll close at the end of the month for proposals. And then we'll go through a process of vetting the vendors and identifying a potential vendor, and then hopefully coming into a contract with that vendor between August and September, end of August, early September. Once we get to a vendor, then it's a process of identifying our locations. If you remember the last time I presented on those cameras, we had already identified our top 3 locations within the city, one of them being 104th, between, just west of Huron, moving out towards Zuni, right? And then on 112th between Washington and Irma, and the third location being, why am I losing the third location?
Melody.
It'll come to me.
I thought it was Melody.
No,
Maybe not.
no. I'm sorry. I'll have to think about it.
No,
But we have 3 identified, okay? And then with that, our intention is to bring in a mobile device as well. So the mobile device would be the utilization in residential areas or in areas that were not safety-sensitive zones. And the reason that is because the state statute is very clear that the fine is a fixed $40 fine. It is a civil penalty. It has no points, and you can only double the fines if it is in a construction zone or a safety or a school zone. Those are the only 2 parameters under which the fine can be doubled, and it can be doubled to $80. Our fines in our school zones and our fines in our zones that are construction are already higher, right? Our safety sensitive zones are 3 times that kind of a fine. Our school zones, same. So we would be reducing the fines if we put those automated speed enforcement cameras into those type of zones. But they can be utilized in other residential areas throughout the city. All that's required is signage. I've worked with the city attorney, Corey Hoffman, on this as to whether we have to post signs and there's a 30-day period of time when you can't issue citations. The signage is out there letting them know that speed enforcement is going to be conducted, but you can't issue citations. We can do those kind of postings on an annual basis, and then we can move that device throughout the city, throughout the wards, based on residents' concerns, council concerns, so that we can better have traffic enforcement within those locations. But they only write citations for 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. And what a lot of our data shows us is that's a very few number of cars. Even in our safety sensitive zones, that's a very few number of cars. So it has to be really 11 miles an hour or above to issue the citation, because the radars have a 1 mile an hour margin of error. So in order for the fine to be collected, it has to be 10 or more. So generally we'll issue at 11, and then the citations will be automated. The locations that we identified, we believe will pay for that mobile device because it's the most expensive of the cameras. And they'll move them on a monthly to a quarterly basis based on the contract we provide. And then they'll do all the calibration, and the tickets are automated.
Okay.
So we do hope to bring kind of like a broader plan towards not just the safety sensitive zones, but speeding in general, right? Identify our top locations and then move to our safety sensitive zones as a secondary locations, and then utilize speed enforcement, automated speed enforcement in other residential areas to help offset what isn't necessarily a safety sensitive zone.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, I really appreciate the last few slides that, talk about the resource efficiency and your guys' focus. I think that's helpful for residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chief, did you have more information for us, or was that?
It's just data points. I mean, there's 4 zones. There's not really much more. It's a lot of repetitive, right? I mean, the data is the same across all the zones. The speeds are different, right? But the data points are identical. What we are seeing is very similar reductions. But the only other piece that I wanted to make sure we were aware of is that we are going to start reporting out on not just speeding, but on stop signs and on other type of violations, so that it's a little clearer, right? Because it was a little unclear. Everybody kind of thought if it was a safety sensitive zone, it was automatically a speeding ticket. And like I said, in the IRMA zone, it's primarily stop signs. In the Fox Run zone, it's primarily stop signs. But as we move through and we start utilizing the new reporting tool, you'll see the number of stop sign violations versus the number of speeding violations. And then other can be so many things. I'd have to have a chart the size of this whole sheet of paper for everything else it can be. So others primarily could be they're moving violations. So it's something like a turn signal. It's something like a headlight or lamp are out. Something that's an actual moving violation, not your license plates were expired or you didn't have a driver's license or those type of violations.
Okay. So I guess my question is, have any of you noticed any, like, maybe potential expansion of the safety sensitive zones? Like, are the zones themselves working in terms of the area that's allotted for them right now? Or is there any potential for changes, or possibly maybe that's where the automated vans can come in, or radars?
If we need to extend the length of a zone, like the Fox Run Parkway zone covers the majority of the Fox Run Parkway area. Melody is the one zone, and now that you've sparked my memory, we did discuss putting a automated speed enforcement on Melody south of the current zone. That was the goal, right? And that's because the data supports that being a location where we get that speed. We can use the mobile automated speed enforcement in areas outside of the zone and still issue citations for $40 at any location, right? Just, we need to sign, we need to do those parameters. The statute's super specific, so what has to happen is that we will be bringing all of that back to council because there's a city ordinance that's required, and then by referendum, you have to identify zones, corridors within the city. Unless it is a residential neighborhood, it is under statutory provision, the state statute, that the council adopt a resolution for areas that are non-residential corridors, so to speak. So like the 104th corridor, you'd have to dictate that that's a corridor. Melody is residential. You wouldn't have to dictate that that's a corridor. You could post the signs, and you'd be able to put a automated speed enforcement camera there in a rotational or permanent position. But if it's a non-residential section of the city, then by resolution, the council has a decision to say, this is going to be a speed enforcement corridor, and we're going to post signs, and we're going to do and abide by the state statute, get CDOT approval for it, and then you can go ahead and implement a permanent or temporary mobile device in those locations.
Okay, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, this whole thing came about in terms of looking at what Fort Collins did with their speed corridors as well. So 104th, Washington, all those places that we know are hotspots. So thank you so much for the effort and the data. I too am in favor of this new updated safety sensitive zone report. It sounds like everybody else is as well. Yes, everybody thinks it's good. Okay, excellent. I just want to say thank you again because the data obviously supports that the signs are working. If it's reducing that peak speed, right, people are hitting their brakes. I see it all the time on Community Center Drive. On my way here, you see the brakes, when everybody sees the signs flashing. So I'm definitely in favor of bigger signs that, kind of draw everybody's attention a little bit better.
Yeah, it's a light bar. It's going to look very much like a squad car. That's the goal. And the third location, I'm sorry, I just recalled it. Melody was a mobile one. It's Irma. It's between 104th and 112th near the park. That was the third location where we had identified speeds for the automated speed enforcement.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I think everything looks good. Was there anything else that you needed from us?
No, I just wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to look at the data. This is all of the data. The last time we provided this, we tried to brief in the data even more. This time I said, this is what the data collects. So everything you're seeing on these slides are the data points that are available through those signs. And all we did was average them. Otherwise, you would have gotten 30 sheets of paper per month per zone for 6 months. You'd have never been able to get through it. So.
Well, the data doesn't lie.
Yeah.
So data-informed policing and technology is definitely the future.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other items for council tonight? No? Well, great. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Happy Monday evening.